This is things you don't know.
Today's episode is about how France, almost by accident, supercharged the United States.
This is Napoleon's fire sale.
Interesting way to put that, Chandler.
Thank you.
In 1800, France quietly reclaimed Louisiana from Spain.
But Louisiana wasn't the real goal, friends.
No, Haiti was.
Santo Domingo was the richest colony on earth. Sugar, coffee, and slavery on an industrial scale.
Napoleon imagined a Caribbean empire.
Louisiana would feed it.
And then came the revolution.
Enslaved men and women rose up, led first by Toussaint Louverture and then Jean-Jacques Dessalines.
Napoleon sent 30,000 troops.
Most never returned.
And yes, Dr. Deneen, and some of the things that caused the troops not to return are yellow fever, guerrilla warfare, and just all around collapse.
After an unparalleled struggle, France lost Haiti.
And with it, any really good reason to keep Louisiana, so Napoleon thought. Meanwhile, Britain was preparing for war again.
British strategy had one rule: never allow a single power to totally dominate Europe, what they call the no hegemon rule.
That's right, Dr. Deneen, and Napoleon knew that Louisiana was indefensible.
If Britain took it, the U.S. would be trapped between two empires.
So Napoleon did something extraordinaire.
He offered to sell everything at a bargain basement price.
800,000 square miles.
16 future U.S. states for $15 million.
4 cents an acre.
That's cheaper than Manhattan Island. The United States doubled in size overnight.
15 future states, as you said, Dr. Deneen.
Yeah, this was a continental power, but by accident.
We tend to forget, though, the land wasn't empty. There were just non-white people living their own lives, and they had to deal with a new power.
Native nations paid the price.
And Haiti, the nation that proved the people of African descent could challenge European supremacy, whose revolution made the deal possible, was punished with isolation and generations of debt.
So, what don't most people know about this?
That the American Midwest exists because enslaved revolutionaries shattered a European empire.
And also that Napoleon didn't sell Louisiana out of generosity, but out of fear.
Oh, yeah. And that the United States rose not through destiny, but through collapse.
The unfortunate reality, friends, is that history doesn't always reward virtue. It rewards timing and luck.
Yeah. And there's a version of the Louisiana purchase we don't like to tell about.
Because it's not triumphant.
No, it's not. It's anxious.
This is a story where the president almost says no.
Not because he lacked vision, not because he didn't want the country to expand, but because, in the beginning at least, he believed in limits. Thomas Jefferson was a strict constructionist.
He believed the federal government had only the powers explicitly listed in the Constitution.
Yep, and the Constitution says nothing about buying half the continent.
Privately, Jefferson admitted it.
He wrote that the government had no authority to hold foreign territory.
Exactly. He even drafted a constitutional amendment.
That's how serious his doubt was. Can you imagine, Dr. Weaver and Chandler, how different the country would be if a president didn't act unilaterally at this point and set a precedent for the next 200 years?
Yeah, that's kind of unimaginable.
It is quite something.
Yes, it is.
So Madison and Gallatin disagreed. They were his advisors.
Future President James Madison and Treasury Secretary Albert Gallatin, they argued that the treaty power implied the authority to acquire land.
They also pointed out something clever, didn't they, Dr. Deneen?
They did. There's a section in the Constitution that explains how to govern territories. So the idea of that was, why would they put this in here? The great founding fathers, if we didn't think we were going to get territories eventually, it assumes future territories will exist. Jefferson framed the decision in a moral framework. He compared himself to a parent.
Okay. Sort of like a guardian acting beyond strict authority for a child's good.
Oh, Dr. Weaver, that's a dangerous analogy there.
Jefferson knew it. He agonized over it.
Yes, he did. Congress even lost its mind. They went crazy.
You know the irony here? The political parties reversed roles overnight. The Federalists that were champions of big government and large scale presidential powers didn't like it when those powers were used by somebody they didn't like. So they suddenly loved strict construction. And Jefferson's party, the Democratic Republicans, defended executive power.
Hypocrisy was everywhere.
Jefferson urged silence.
The less said about the constitutional difficulty, he wrote to Vice President Aaron Burr. Check out our podcast on him, the better.
Yes, and that's not nothing, is it, Dr. Deneen?
Not at all. The Senate votes by 24-7 to approve the purchase.
Jefferson signed.
And no court ever stopped it.
So, what don't most people know?
That American expansion began with a breach of the Constitution.
And that necessity, not clarity, set the precedent.
Jefferson never fully forgave himself.
But the country accepted the result.
And once that line was crossed, there was no going back.
So, the Louisiana Purchase is both a triumph and a tragedy, a story of land gained and voices lost, particularly of Native Americans and other indigenous people.
Absolutely. But there's also another layer we almost never talk about. For a brief moment, Louisiana represented a different racial order than the one the United States would eventually impose.
Yes, and this is not equal. It's not just, but different. And in some ways, more flexible than the Anglo American system that replaced it.
Under French rule, Louisiana followed the Code Noir of 1724. That's a brutal slave code, but one that legally distinguished three groups in society, not two: white people, enslaved Africans, and gens de couleur libre, free people of color.
That distinction mattered.
Free people of African descent could sue white people in court, own property, serve in militias. Some could even vote. They could marry. Interracial marriage was banned on paper, but unlike in many other colonies or states, that ban was ignored in practice.
And that tripartite system, common in the Caribbean and Latin America, created space for an intermediate class that simply just didn't exist in the British colonies.
By the late French period, New Orleans already had several hundred free people of color: artisans, merchants, property owners, mostly Catholic, fully embedded in civic life.
Yeah, let's turn to a more in-depth focus on property, family, and contradiction. French civil law also recognized contracts that settled property on mixed race partners and their children.
That's where an informal but very powerful idea called placage came in.
Yes, it did. Women of mixed heritage and their children could become free, educated, and property Creoles of color.
Not just in New Orleans, but across the southern Gulf. Natchez, Mobile, Biloxi, Pensacola, even St. Augustine.
Yeah, I have an uncle that lives there, Dr. Deneen.
How wonderful.
Yeah, it was still slavery. It was still coercion, and it was still unequal.
But it produced a society that didn't collapse race into a single absolute binary.
Now, let's talk about the American arrival here.
And they brought Anglo American assumptions based on British common law. Slavery is rigidly racial, man submission, freeing slaves is rare and suspicious, and interracial unions as illicit.
And they moved quickly to narrow the space.
Free black people were required to post peace bonds, a substantial amount of money. Emancipations were restricted or outlawed without legislative approval. There was a steady tightening of the law.
And the goal was quite clear: collapse a three-tier society into a two-tier society.
And yet, that earlier legal head start mattered and continued to matter.
Thousands of French speaking Catholic people of color remained property owning and organized.
And they built churches, schools, and even mutual aid societies.
The first mixed race group of Catholic nuns, the Sisters of the Holy Family, came to New Orleans in 1778, and later observers noted what they called the colored aristocracy in places like St. Louis.
That status was tested during the War of 1812.
A month before the British reached New Orleans, Andrew Jackson issued a proclamation to what he called the Sons of Freedom of the territory.
Yes, and in that proclamation, Dr. Deneen, Jackson promised same pay, same rations, and even a promise of land.
2 battalions of free men of color mustered and held the American flank in the Battle of New Orleans.
Jackson publicly praised their courage and called them citizens.
Though Congress later reneged on the land, pensions eventually followed. Decades later, they delayed admission that their service counted.
Louisiana wasn't unique.
New York raised black regiments. Baltimore's defenses were heavily African American. Privateers, sailors, scouts, there were many serving.
Yes, and that service became proof of freedom.
For some, wartime records later meant survival, evidence against kidnapping into slavery, the maintenance of property rights, even voting in some cases.
And now the part that makes everyone uncomfortable.
The unfortunate fact is by the early 1800s, some free people of color owned slaves.
Yes, they did, and some reasons for that. Well, one was protection. It was to protect themselves and their loved ones.
So, in other words, if they owned a African American slave, they were protected because that person was then their property. So somebody else couldn't own them. Is that what you're saying there, Chandler?
Exactly, Dr. Weaver. And another reason was, hey, they wanted to get on this because the white men were in it and they wanted to have what the white man had.
So kind of a marker of status.
Yeah, pretty much. And in that day too, it was also said that light-skinned people kind of had it a little better. And what do you think about that, Dr. Weaver?
Well, yes, I think that's correct. The system really didn't leave any clean choices here.
Exactly.
There are many prominent families, like the Mortiers of Cane River. The most famous African descended slave owner is Marie Theresa Concoin, who later becomes a major landowner, starts a bank, and her descendants fight for the Confederacy.
Yeah, this wasn't hypocrisy so much as entrapment.
It's a world where survival, labor, racial ideas, and laws were so violently intertwined, people had to do the best they could, and no option was entirely morally pure.
That's exactly right, Dr. Deneen. So, what don't most people know about this?
That Louisiana briefly preserved the racial order that was neither equal nor simple, but not yet locked into the rigid binaries that would follow. Within that order, there was a certain amount of autonomy for some people.
And when you talk about the binaries, you're talking black and white. Is that right?
Quite so, yes.
Okay. That American rule didn't just expand territory, it narrowed possibilities.
That's an unpleasant truth. And the legacy of the Louisiana Purchase includes not only land or power, but a lost moment when American racial laws might have slowly taken a different path.
Yes, indeed. That is history in the key we rarely play it in.
Yes, it is. And it's a piece of history that people should know more about, I believe.
Well, thanks for tuning in today and listening. We hope you'll come back and join us again soon.
Bye for now.
Please give a like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.